Hi everyone, I'm Janna.
And I'm Julianne. Welcome to Life in a Salad.
So today we have something fun to talk about. It's gestational diabetes, which I actually just recently was diagnosed with. But while you're at it, if you like our videos, be sure to subscribe and like to Life in a Salad.
So diving in a little bit more with diabetes, there are 3 different types of diabetes.
Right, we have type 1, type 2, and then also gestational diabetes. So type 1 is generally when you have inherited it through genetics. And so with that, basically your body doesn't make enough insulin to combat carbs, sugars, and that can raise your blood sugar levels. Most people are diagnosed when they're kids, but I've known adults to also be diagnosed with this early on. Have you seen that?
Yeah, occasionally that does happen where it's not caught earlier. And then of course type 2 diabetes, I think a lot of people think of this more as adult onset, but this can also occur for younger individuals as well. I've seen it with even teenagers or kids, especially more recently in the last decade or so.
Yes, I think there's a lot of kids out there that maybe don't have the healthiest lifestyles, and so it just kind of catches up with you, and you can be diagnosed with it really at any age.
Yeah, and this is a little bit different. The way that the body, I guess if you're diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, what's going on there is that at this point, your body has become actually very resistant to insulin. So a lot of times it is just if you're getting lots of, sugary foods, simple carbs in your diet, like Janna was saying, maybe you're having a little bit, maybe less activity to combat those things. So our standard American diet, it's very common for that to happen for people more and more these days. So that's just a quick overrun with what type 1 and type 2 diabetes looks like. Today, as Janna just mentioned, she was recently diagnosed with gestational diabetes, which does mean when you're pregnant having diabetes.
Yes, when I was diagnosed, which was just a couple of weeks ago, I was so sad. I couldn't believe it. I kind of pride myself in living a healthy lifestyle most of the time.
And she does.
Yeah,
so it was kind of shocking.
Yeah, it's not that I don't ever eat sugar, but I'm very limited on it. And so, I was just really surprised with that. And so I guess only according to the CDC, only 2 to 10% of pregnant women are actually diagnosed, so I thought it was higher. Other people did too.
Yeah, we did. We thought this was super common, and it's still relatively common. 2 to 10% of people is a good amount of the pregnant population. But so just thinking ahead for anyone that is pregnant or may become pregnant at some point, it might be helpful to learn a little bit more about what causes gestational diabetes and what you can do to try to prevent it or deal with it if you do have it.
Right. And so first and foremost, before prevention, obviously you have to be diagnosed. Mm-hmm. And the way that they do diagnose you is that you go into the lab, you drink this sugary drink. Most people talk about it and say gross. It's so gross. I did that. It was okay. I got through it. But my first test came back positive for it. Mm-hmm. So because of that, I had to go back and do another test, which is a 3-hour test. Basically, they draw labs, get your preliminary labs, and then you drink this drink. And then every hour you have to come back and have your labs drawn to see where your blood sugar is ranging at that point. And so I failed the test really bad. I think my blood sugar, I don't know for sure, was over 200.
So that's pretty high. Just as a quick overview, Janna, what are normal blood sugar levels? If you have just eaten something, what should it look like?
Yeah, so in the hospital, and this is kind of, to me, giving more leeway. But when I work in the hospital as a nurse, if someone's under 140, we won't treat them with insulin. Mm-hmm. It's obviously different if you're on oral diabetic meds like metformin. Maybe you don't check as much, and it's kind of different because that's a pill that ranges for the whole day. Usually people take it once a day. Mm-hmm. Or insulin, you might take after each meal and see where you're at, or sometimes before a meal. It just depends kind of what your doctor recommends for you. And so generally, if you're over 140, we're going to treat you in the hospital. If you are not diabetic or pre-diabetic and happen to be checking your sugars Generally you want that under 120, even after a meal.
Yeah.
To really try to stay non-diabetic.
So those are some really good guidelines just to be aware of. So that's, listening to Janna getting a 200, obviously that's concerning, and they had to make her do a repeat test, so she got to have that lovely sugary drink again.
Yeah. Not fun, but you just get through it. I say choose the orange. That's what they offered me, was orange or fruit punch. I thought
fruit punch was not good, right?
I don't know. I've never had it. I thought the orange was not that bad. The second time around, it was way worse because I hadn't eaten.
Okay.
Or the morning, I know this probably sounds weird. So the morning that I went for the first test, I actually did eat, but I ate only protein. And so it shouldn't really raise your blood sugar, but who knows? And so ever since I've been checking my sugars, it's kind of interesting. When I wake up in the morning lately, my sugars have been higher than after I eat a meal. Like this morning, I woke up as 122. And then I ate a meal that had carbs and sugar. Not sugar, but fruit. I shouldn't say sugar. I mean, sugar's fine, but I didn't eat that. And then I had some protein with it. Checked 2 hours later, I was 107. Okay. So it's just kind of interesting. There's also something called the somogyieffect, which is where your blood sugar in the middle of the night can kind of go like this. It's like a waveform, a peak.
Yeah.
And so maybe that's happening to me. Maybe I'm stressed out by pregnancy. So stress can also play a big part in it as well.
Oh yeah, for anyone that has any form of diabetes, they've probably noticed this a bit too, that it's not only food that will impact your blood sugar level. So yeah, if you're feeling super stressed out, anything that's going to even overstress the body, some people will find that if they're doing some really high intensity workouts, sometimes that can spike the sugars too. So you want to be careful with those things.
Right. And so when you're pregnant with gestational, there's some risk factors that can set you up for this. That includes being overweight, having PCOS. If you're an older maternal age, like 30s to 40s, already being pre-diabetic or having gestational in a previous pregnancy can set you up for that.
And just general physical inactivity. So if you're working to really form a regular lifestyle where you're staying very active, this is going to help reduce your risks for having gestational diabetes or any type of diabetes for that matter. And once you do have it, it's still going to be very, very beneficial to add in a regular exercise or physical activity routine to help control those sugars. So what we're looking at when you're thinking of aerobic type exercise, so anything that's kind of getting that heart rate up a bit, so thinking like a brisk walk, anything that kind of gets that heart rate going for, you can think longer periods of time. Swimming is excellent, especially for pregnancy. A lot of women will like to do that, cycling, things like that. As a general, ideally you want to get at least 30 minutes a day, 5 days a week at a minimum of kind of moderate intensity exercise. Again, of course, being sure you're following guidelines from your doctor if you have any type of limitations or restrictions.
Right. And there have been studies that they've done, and now I think they're actually coming out saying, like, well, this is more of a fact, that if you take a 10 to 15 minute walk after eating, that it can lower your blood sugar up to 20 points. Obviously, that's individual specific on what it's truly going to do for you, but it's definitely something worth looking into.
Yeah.
And walking is great for you anyways, so doing that movement after eating and not just being like, oh, I ate a big meal, I'm going to go lay down. I mean, sometimes I feel that way, but it's better if you don't.
Yeah, and if you don't even have the full 10 minutes, whatever you do have, literally if you're getting up walking for 2 minutes, 5 minutes can be very beneficial. We talked about, of course, more aerobic type exercise and activity, but something else that is very, very beneficial and uses sugar and insulin so well is actually going to be weight-bearing exercise. So strength training. So, even after you just have, a little bit more carbs in your food or your meal, maybe it's dark outside, maybe you don't want to go for a walk. Sometimes I feel like that in our community, there sometimes are coyotes outside, things like that. So actually just doing some strength training exercise, maybe grab some quick dumbbells, do some weight bearing exercise, do some calf raises in the kitchen.
Yeah, didn't you tell me that calf raises, if you had more calf muscle, right? That you are less insulin resistant?
Yeah.
Is that how
so it can help to after you're done with eating a meal. So just adding in that exercise actually will help to, yes, reduce having that insulin resistance effect or having higher blood sugar levels. So yeah, that one was a really quick, easy one to do. But you could do any type of weight bearing exercise. Do some squats, body weight squats. It doesn't have to be anything crazy intense. I've actually started incorporating that for myself regularly. I'm curious as to what that looks like. I haven't been checking my sugars daily after foods, but I'm actually looking into getting a continuous glucose monitor. So if anyone is familiar with that, that's a great way that you can very easily check your sugars throughout the day. So if you're pre-diabetic, you have gestational diabetes, or you have diabetes, an easy way to kind of just check the way that your body specifically is responding to different foods, different activities, and you can kind of get an idea, okay, if my sugars are going up, during, these certain times of the day, what is maybe linked to that? Is it that you had a really high carb meal? Sometimes they're foods that you don't expect either. So they can be foods that maybe for some people maybe they do just fine, and other people it causes a pretty intense effect, and vice versa. Some foods, so you might think of a lot of, I've heard this before, white breads and white rice, are going to spike those sugars. But for some people, white rice does better for them, better than quinoa, better than brown rice.
Yes.
In terms of how your body is utilizing those sugars. So I actually will have to do a follow-up with that once I get one. I'm going to do that and just see how my body responds to different things like that. Stress levels, that can be part of it too, like we said. So you can kind of watch for those links.
Right. And then something else is that when someone gets gestational diabetes, obviously there's quite a bit of risk factors. But one of the main reasons is because the baby is taking insulin when it's growing from you. And so if you don't have enough for yourself, then you don't have enough insulin to get into those cells. And so the baby's taking it all. So your blood sugar will raise, and then you don't have enough insulin to combat that. And so that's why some women after having the baby are not diabetic anymore, because now they have enough insulin. So just because someone has gestational diabetes doesn't mean that they're going to be full-blown diabetic after. So
oh no, not at all.
Maybe good news.
It is good news, and this is a perfect time too to start really watching those factors, so implementing those strategies that we talked about, because it doesn't mean that you're suddenly forever diabetic. But that being said, it does increase your risk of becoming type 2 diabetic down the road. So you want to be a little extra vigilant about that.
Right. And something I think that applied to me that I've heard studies on. So before I was pregnant, I ate pretty low carb compared to maybe the average person for health reasons. Mm-hmm. And for me, it wasn't a problem at the time, but whatever you do to your body, it gets used to. There's something called homeostasis. Your body always wants to be in a regulated, healthy state of whatever feels normal to it. So if you make changes to your body's always trying to adapt to it. And so, like I said, I was eating super low carb. I've done that for a long time. And so I've heard that if you do that for a long time, that if you go and eat carb heavy meals or really high sugary things, that if your body isn't acclimated to that, then you can spike your sugars really high, even though your body may not actually be diabetic. And so, because it's just not used to that, that can happen to people who are on low carb diets, mm-hmm. or the keto diet. Yep. When they go back to eating carbs, one, they'll gain weight, but two, they may also, if they don't gradually work into it and start just eating whatever, they could become diabetic for that reason. Or it may appear that way just by checking your blood sugar, even though their body just isn't used to it. It's something that you have to adapt to over time for your body to get used to it. So that could be another factor into why people get gestational diabetes, kind of like I did. It's more of a hypothesis at this point. It's definitely not proven facts to say, but again, we're not here to be doctors or give medical advice, more of our own
just personal and experiences too. So this is something, because I think something very worthwhile to mention here, as we're doing more research, there's not enough research done to show one way or the other what this looks like for women who previous to pregnancy were lower carb diets and suddenly maybe are increasing their calories overall or their carb intake. But for Janna, she had her hemoglobin A1C checked prior to pregnancy, which was not that long ago. And in case anyone doesn't know, the hemoglobin A1C is going to be an average of your blood sugar levels over the past about 3 months or so. So, what was your number previous to pregnancy, which you had done just a few months probably before that?
So
right?
I was at 5.3, which I'd always love to have it lower, but it's not.
That's good.
Yeah, it's not considered pre-diabetic or diabetic or anything like that. And so I really thought I was good. But again, you know, your body gets used to whatever you do to it. And then with the baby taking insulin, you just don't have enough. So if you are gestational diabetes, you just really want to watch your sugar.